What's up everybody, I'm Derek, this is Rocky E Forge, and today I am not doing a project video. Instead, I am doing an unboxing, because today I just got my Broadbeck Ironworks 2x72 inch belt grinder, and I'm very excited to set it up, so let's get rocking. Alright, so first things first, before we get to the actual unboxing of the grinder and the stand and everything that I've got, I want to make sure that I get this out there. I am not sponsored by Broadbeck in any way. You know, they're not paying me to say anything good, or no one is paying me to say anything bad about the grinder or anything of that nature. I bought this with my own money, completely based on a number of things that I'll get into through the remainder of this video, but I'm not sponsored in any way, and I bought the Mastery package from Broadbeck to upgrade my grinding capabilities in the shop and hopefully improve my knife making skills as well. I have an idea of what's in each box, but broadly speaking, what comes in this package is the 2x72 grinder itself and a stand that I imagine I have to put together. I did pay the added fees, I think it was a couple $100 to actually have them assemble the grinder and wire the motor and kind of fit everything together. So I'm looking forward to not having to do all of that work myself, and I should just be able to assemble the stand, put it in the corner of my shop, and get to grinding. So I think I'm going to open the big box first, because I have an inkling that that's where the assembled grinder is, and I want to see how everything looks fresh out the box. So let's do it. And just a note here, I think 2 weeks or less since I ordered the package that the entire thing was delivered. So if you're looking to get a grinder, if you have the money, of course, and you're looking to get a grinder very quickly, they do really well with shipping. I think they technically require a 2-week lead period, but I'm pretty sure it showed up in less than 2 weeks. So shipping out of Oregon, shipping to Washington, so the shipping time itself didn't take very long. And I think most of the time that I waited was actually just for the assembly and balancing. All right, so it's nicely packaged, has some bubble wrap and styrofoam in there to protect it in shipping, and it is assembled. This is the chassis of the grinder itself. All right, so we're gonna get this thing out of the box to look at. This is pretty heavy, and I'm trying to figure out how this do. So this must be where the motor mounts. There should be instructions in one of the boxes, and I will find them eventually. Okay, so this must go like this. I think this is tilted out. Yeah, so this would be in the 90 degree. Okay, cool. Alrighty, so this is the chassis of the belt grinder itself. It's got a tilting 90 degree tiltability. It's tilted horizontal right now. So this is the point down here is the base where it will bolt to the actual stand. This is where the motor mounts, and then the rest of like the pulleys and stuff will go in this area on that side. So this will be able to swivel 90 degrees and grind horizontally, or swivel to the normal upright position of a regular grinder. And as I mentioned previous, I opted to get the assembled version. So this is all, I didn't have to do any of this part myself at all. And that option, while it costs a couple $100, does come with the nice blue, bright blue, signature Broadbeck powder coating on it. If you want to do a custom color, you can buy them unpainted and unassembled, and paint all the parts yourself and assemble it yourself. I just didn't trust myself to not have tracking issues if I built the whole thing myself, so I asked for the assembly instead. So I'm gonna set this aside and get to the next box, but it's already looking fantastic, and I'm excited to get this thing put together. All right, so I started on box 3, now we're moving on to box number 5. I'm doing this in no particular order just because of the way I had them stacked up. All right, this looks like it is part of the stand. I got it powder coated black as well. So that's gotta be where the base bolts together. Here's hoping I find the instructions soon. I think I'm gonna leave this in the box and just pull out piece by piece. Just know that this is part of the stand. or the entire stand. I don't know. I have to pull it out first. But I'm just going to build that in place. So we'll go ahead and move to box number 2. Now this, I imagine, is the motor. I got a variable speed 2 horsepower motor. They have various options from 1 to 3, all variable speed and all different electrical wirings. This one can be used with, I think it's wired initially for 110 and has the ability to be rewired up to 220 to add that additional oomph. I think technically if it's a 110, it's technically a 1.5 horsepower motor. It utilizes the full 2 horsepower if you have it on 220. Interesting, I got some marring from what I assume is them, because they not only do they assemble everything and then take some of it apart for shipping, but they also wire everything up and then test it to make sure that it tracks well if you pay for that option. So I assume this marring on the tool arm is just from them cranking down and because it's kind of all up and down the arm, testing various functionalities and adjusting if they need to. So this is the tool arm itself with the flat platen and wheel. Flat platen, I think this is a 4-inch contact wheel and the upper pulley all established, and it looks like it's on a swivel arm that can swivel all over the place, which is awesome. The motor does in fact come separately, and I need to wait 3 to 5 business days to hopefully get it. So that does in fact confirm that I don't have the motor in any of these boxes, which is unfortunate, but I can get the whole thing built otherwise and just wait for the motor. So just know that if you do buy a broadback, the motor and the BFD are coming separately. Just account for that in your plans. All right, next coming out of the box is going to be the adjustable work rest. And hopefully you can see that. This fully rotates over 90 degrees and the entire rest itself can rotate as well. It's got a nice little cutout, so the belt should be almost zero tolerance between whatever you're working on and the rest. And then this can actually, it's loosened enough, spin around and give you clearance for different attachments that can go with the broadback, which is pretty awesome. And there's all sorts of adjustability and rotatability in the arm that it's on as well, which is super cool. All right, next is just an additional arm that goes into the tool arm tube, for lack of a better word. We've got a 4-inch contact wheel and a 5-inch contact wheel. And then we've got our small wheel attachment, which bolts to the side of the main chassis and holds 1-inch and a 3/4 inch slim radius wheels for grinding small radii or things of that nature. And last up for now is going to be box number 4, which, based on the shape, I assume is the remainder of the base legs of the stand. Yeah, for sure. And I believe I got the stand with some casters, so it's easy to move. So this has the locks for the casters and the caster wheels themselves, and all the hardware, and we got wrenches and Allen keys and stuff like that in there for assembly. Oh, and the instructions. 1 page. It's for assembling the casters. Okay. I haven't found any print instructions in any of the boxes. I know they've got, there's some more hardware. I know they've got instructions on their website and they've got some videos for everything. All right, so that is all for the unboxing for the time being, and I've cleaned out the corner of my shop, so the forge and everything is up toward the door in that direction. I've got a new shelving unit here to store all of the stuff that I had in this corner, and I'm going to be building this corner into my grinding zone of my shop, and with that in mind, I'm going to get to work on building the stand and then attaching the grinder to it. And then waiting for the motor to arrive. So let's keep on rocking. All right, so little detour, because I was missing the base of the stand, so I had to contact their customer service and get a base shipped to me. So now we can get started on the base. Just a couple days after the main bulk of the chassis and the stand and everything arrived, so did the motor, which I have not opened yet, and now we should have all the components to build the whole thing. I'm just gonna build everything out on the cardboard. As you can maybe see, I've got all the parts laid out, and now I've got the base. So, first thing to do here is I'm gonna spin this around, and I'm gonna put the leveling feet on. These all come individually packaged. So I was incorrect. You don't spin this over. You want these nuts underneath, so it's actually going to go down, which means that doesn't make sense. So the only way this makes sense to me is if this goes down on top of that nut. But if I were to pick it up, you just lose all the feet. So this head doesn't move. All right, this swivels around the pivot point, which is hard attached to that head. This nut does move. So this would be the way to adjust level with the thing sitting on top of it, but there's nothing to keep it on when you lift the base up off of it. So that's kind of odd to me. I might put some nuts. This is probably 1/4-20 if I were to guess. I might just put some nuts on top, just loose, so that it does, when you actuate the caster, it'll lift that up off the floor, but it'll keep it hanging there so that I don't have to struggle my way, climb under the thing just to put all of the legs back on. But we'll see. All right, so I found some 1/4-20, my own 1/4-20 nuts. I just haven't looked through the hardware enough to know that they included 1/4-20 nuts to attach. But I'm gonna go ahead and just take the liberty myself to put a 1/4-inch washer on the bottom and put all these up through the base so that I can use the nut that came with it, the one that's down here toward the foot, to adjust the height of each foot because my floor is not super level in the corner of my shop. And then I'm going to put my own 1/4-inch. I should probably use a washer there too, but my own 1/4-20 nuts, just to keep the legs attached when I lift this off the ground or when I use the casters to move this thing around. All right, so after that, this comes with a bunch of hardware and specifically mounting plates for the casters that attach on the outside of the long edge of each side. So they go here and here at each corner, and specifically, the mounting for this also attaches the vertical legs of the base, which could prove interesting if you're doing it by yourself. All right, so first thing I figured out, it has to be these flat-headed Phillips head screw carriage bolts that affix these frames to the side here, which are unnecessarily long in my opinion, but maybe I haven't figured out the purpose. But those are going to go in on either side, just like so, so that the brackets for the casters are on the outside of the legs. Now the reason it has to be these black kind of flat-headed Phillips head bolts is that the levers that control kind of flip up and push down the casters slide into these black brackets like so, and then operate the actual casters, put them up and down. Now no other bolt in here, no other carriage bolt in the kit will actually seat into the little chamfered portion of the hole here, and there won't be enough clearance to actually fit these into the grooves on either side of this. I still haven't figured out why these bolts are so long. Maybe someone can chime in the comments, but the video does show that there are supposed to be 2 washers per bolt, but the hardware kit only came with 1 washer per bolt, plus 1 spare, which is nice, but I still haven't figured out, I haven't seen any lock washers for these, which would be kind of the thought process I would have of like maybe it's supposed to be a lock washer, I don't know. But I'm not gonna actually tighten these yet because I think this is gonna need some wiggle room when we get to the next step. But I'm just gonna hand tighten all of these and then come back in and tighten everything up once I kind of get everything kind of roughly put together. That way I can keep stuff a little more mobile in case things need to fit together a little bit different as we build. Because so far this bottom bolt is the only thing that is keeping this thing, like it's able to rotate to an extent. When I go to put the top on, I'll be able to rotate this so that it'll actually all fit together, and then I can come back in and tighten everything up. All right, so the next step in the stand building process will be to come in with the side panels, which will establish the vertical height of the stand. And each of these square holes allows you to set the height of the stand from 43.75 inches at the lowest up to 49.75 inches at the highest, and that's actually measured up to the center of the platen, which means you can actually vary the height of the stand, which varies the height of the point where your normal grinding point, depending on where you set the height of the side panels. And you can vary between those two heights in 1-inch increments, which is pretty sweet. So just to make it easy on myself, I'm going to use my drill press as an analog where I feel comfortable grinding. I usually don't like having my arms greater than or less than 90 degrees. A good 90-degree bend on my elbows is kind of the most comfortable place I like to be on that platen when I'm pressing my work against it, this being the stand-in for the platen in this particular case. So where I've got the wire wheel set is a little high right now. And if you've got a friend or somebody that can help you out, all you really got to do is get a measurement from the bottom of your elbow to the floor, and that should give you a pretty decent height, which will be comfortable for you grinding. Now, I don't really have anyone around who can help me with that, so I'm using this as kind of an analog for, hey, yeah, this feels pretty comfortable. My elbow's pretty well not greater than or less than 90 degrees. This is about the height that I want to set that platen at. So I can measure this height up to the bottom of my wire wheel cup, and that'll give me a pretty good estimate as to how high I want to set those side panels. Obviously, find whatever works for you. If it's literally just taping a tape measure up against the wall and figuring out where you want to put your hands on that point, awesome, more power to you. This just popped into my head as I was walking past it, and I decided to use it instead. Now, do whatever makes you feel most comfortable while you're grinding. You won't want to spend any time at the grinder if you are not comfortable doing it. But I found that having my elbows bent at about 90 degrees is the most comfortable, and that measurement that I took put me at about 45 to 46 inches, which means I want to come 2 up from the bottom to go from 43 to 45.75, which will put me at the third to bottom hole here. And this is where I'm making sure the legs could pivot on that bottom screw is coming in handy, because I need to be able to kind of wedge this out to find that bottom hole and do the same on both sides, and that should do us. And these are put together using these 1/4-20 round-headed bolts with a square, that have a square, I don't even know how to describe it, you probably can't even see it, that have this square kind of portion to the head that goes through these square holes and these 1/4-20 serrated flange nuts. And I will say that the nuts and bolts on the side piece that are just kind of sandwiching two things together instead of preventing the rotation of the legs, go in a little easier. So maybe start with 1 or 2 of these and move on to these, the ones on either end. Because that direction is to the front and this direction is to the rear, which is designated by where these cutouts are in the side panels, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Now, it's worth noting here that their installation video only shows the install of 2 bolts per side. There are 3 holes, but there are also plenty more square holes in here, so I'm going to save those until the end. So I'm going to move forward with the assumption that 2 is the correct number here per their video, and then if I do have extras, I'll come back and fill that 3rd hole on either side. All right, so next, we're going to come in with this panel that looks an awful lot like the base plate, but it's got these cutouts in the corners. And this is actually a shelf that'll come in and bolt through with these holes, which means I need to get more of these carriage bolts. And this unfortunately doesn't fit on the outside, it goes on the inside, which means I gotta find a good way to hold this up while I put these bolts in. Broadback, I could really teach you a thing or two about optimizing for the user. This is a pain in the butt. And it probably requires some washers or something, but I don't see any in here. And then we're going to come in with the top plate, which should hopefully be the easiest thing to install out of everything because it goes on top of everything. Then all you have to do is nicely line up the holes, pop in those carriage bolts, and then put the nuts on the inside on all four corners, and you should be good to go. All right, so next we install the back panel, and you've got to be careful in doing this because the holes on either side of the side panels line up with the holes in the back panel, and they're, as you can see, offset a little bit. So you got to make sure the level on the holes here is equal to the level on the holes in the back. Is this not supposed to be on the outside? Oh shoot, it is on the inside. I lied about the top panel. It's not the easiest to put on. The top panel actually goes on the inside here, which actually sets the spacing for the back. All right, so I was half correct in that they've got some tabs that actually sit on top, so that should nicely line everything up for us without making it super hard to get this on, back on. Now everything fits. All right, so before I completely finish the stand, I've got everything all nice and tightened up, and I'm going to build the casters and install them before I put the final thing on. Just because the final placard that says Broadback Ironworks kind of, feels like the finishing touch. So we're gonna get these all built and installed on the sides. All right, so this is the orientation we're building this in. This goes up through the hole there. And then we've got a lock washer and a nut. So it does come with its own little wrench to stick between the caster and the frame so that you can hold everything steady and tighten everything up. Or so I thought. All right, so this fits the top screw. It doesn't fit between, once you get any kind of tightness, it doesn't fit between these things to actually hold on to the hex portion of this between the bracket and the actual caster. So maybe rethink this little wrench, Broadback. So just practice your grip strength on holding this little disc and tightening that with a wrench. I finally figured out what these not Allen key things are. They're to prevent the casters from coming out. So now I can come in and simply just step on each of the little levers. There we go. Which locks down the casters, and I can roll this all over the shop now without having any major problems. And we'll roll the nearly completed stand into its new home and unlock all the casters. It does look like I'll need to do some leveling on the feet, but I'll worry about that off screen. And next, I've got the final two panels, the Broadbeck Ironworks actual like badged panel and the backing panel for it. Now, I think it's actually quite funny. This, at least per their website, is meant to be black, where the backing panel is meant to be this bright blue color, but it's backwards. And I think that makes this really unique because it's probably a mistake, and I love it because of it. But we get back to using the 1/4-20 carriage bolts with those square inset heads and the flange nuts, which have been pretty much the same nut and bolt used for every connection all the way since the base, which is nice. And there are 5 square holes in this, and the actual VFD for the electric motor is going to mount over here on this portion, which is why it sticks further out than the top of the stand. So it's important to put the bolts in all 5 of these holes and make sure that it's pretty well mounted to avoid this rotating. I will say that I'm glad that I opted to follow the video and save these carriage bolts till the very end, because I do in fact come right down to the number of holes that were provided and won't be filling the 3rd hole between the side panel and the legs. Now, there's plenty more flange nuts, interestingly, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. Perfect. And perfect. All right, so now that I've got the stand built, it's time to get the actual grinder final assembled. It came assembled, like I paid for the assembly. This has been assembled, tested, etc., and then stripped down for what's necessary for shipping. So I've got to, put it on the stand and mount the motor and all that stuff, but everything should otherwise be pretty well done for me, which is awesome. I'm just gonna line up these holes. And then the chassis is installed using 3/8" hex bolts. And some 3/8" nylon washers that'll keep everything nice and tight. And then realize that you put the entire thing on backwards and have to take it back off and put it back on again. And once we've got the grinder mounted, go ahead and install the spring. There we go. That gives tension to the arm that'll actually tension the belt. And we'll install the tracking wheel. All right, so the motor came separate, and it took, I think it was an extra 2 days from the day that I got all of the rest of the pieces. And that's because they outsource their motors directly, which is totally fine. I got the combo, I got the variable speed 2 horsepower motor for this. It'll only run up to 2. It'll run at 2 on a 220 volt outlet. I've got my dryer hooked up to 220 over in the other wall. So I've got the option to upgrade to 220, but I've just got it running. So it should be 1.5 horsepower total, and I've heard that that's totally fine for most people's use. And as you can see, we've got a box within a box. So the unboxing continues. And this box is the variable frequency drive, or the VFD, and they're pre-wired together, as you can see. Comes with a sticker. Looks like this is a Tech Top industrial electric motor, which, in my opinion, looks pretty darn nice. And in those two boxes, we had the variable frequency drive, or the VFD, which will bolt to the front of the Broadbeck Ironworks blue metal plate, and the 2 horsepower Tech Top industrial motor, which I think looks pretty nice. And in order to install the motor, I'm going to tilt this back to the horizontal position. I'm going to mount the motor using included 3/8 inch bolts. And the instructions say to orient the feet toward the rear of the stand. And this does have included 3/8 inch bolts and lock washers. This is a challenge. Then we remove the plastic cover on the drive shaft and install the keyed drive wheel. Should be approximately 7/16 off the side of the plate. Thank God I've got nothing that is just precisely 7/16 inches. All right, so I've measured this out. It's about 7/16. Should give me a nice spacer. All right, so we're back to the 1/4-20 bolts and the flange nuts to install the VFD. I've got 2 in here already because the bottom portion of the bracket has cutouts. Hope you can see that. Has cutouts, so that makes it's probably the easiest thing to install by yourself. So all you gotta do is set that right on there, and then screw these ones in. Now these holes are real tight. They barely fit the 1/4-20 bolts that came with the whole kit, so you kind of have to screw them in. I ended up scraping some of the powder coat out from inside the actual holes before I could fit these in there. There we go. Okay, good. All right, it's time to accessorize. I throw the platen assembly on there, contact wheel on either side, and this platen with the twist of 2 levers can come right off and give you a slack belt without even having to change out the arm, which is pretty awesome. This has its own tilting ability to reposition for whatever feels comfortable in grinding, which is also super cool. And this will get adjusted when I actually put a belt on here and figure out the tension. So I'm going to leave that just like that. All right, so now kind of the last thing to put together is this adjustable work rest. And it adjusts up and down, left and right. This can actually spin around, and I'll show kind of the features once I've got it installed. And all I really have to do with this, because it came pre-built, is just install the arm that'll go under the other accessory arm, or I guess the main arm of the platen assembly, and install that here in this lower arm, or here in this lower channel rather, for the accessory arm. If I can get it to work. There we go. It's funny. There we go. As you can see, the adjustable work rest tilts a ton, because this will actually spin around and can be used for an angled work rest if you need it like that. There's actually a little cutout here that can rest around the platen and really get you a lot of support right up to the actual belt. You can elevate and angle if you need to hold something way out. It's very agile, and it seems like it'll be really useful to use on this grinder. That pretty well does it for the build. Now I just need to install a belt and get this thing plugged in and start working with it. That's a little loose, as you can tell. So obviously things on both these arms are going to need to come out a bit. And we're going to tension that a little bit. I'm just screwing in and out this knob in order to adjust the angle of the tracking wheel so that this rides pretty well centered on that tracking wheel and lines up with the drive wheel and the other wheels on the Platen assembly. All right, so let's fire this thing up. All right, so the variable frequency drive allows me to change the speed on the belt from very slow all the way up to, it goes in 10% increments, but seems to be tracking quite nicely. The rest I've got set to where I can just very nicely profile grind. I got this squared up real easy, and I think I'm going to be very happy. We've got a nice kind of emergency shut off, so to speak, like a stop switch, and then in order to start, you've got to flick the start switch up, and then you can vary the inlet voltage. All right, so this thing is all set up. I say, let's test her out. Let's get grinding. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, leave a comment, hit subscribe, or ring that notification bell. If you want to support me in the channel further, please consider becoming an honorary striker on my Patreon. That link is in the description below the video. Or please consider becoming a member on my YouTube channel. And as always, keep on rocking.